All right, hello everyone. Hopefully I'm audible. If not, this will be an awkward hour and a half. So, welcome to the first episode of the Sunday Showdown, a debate series in which we hopefully stage debates on interesting high-level topics between competent and serious interlocutors. I will be moderating, of course, and the subject of today's debate is the labor theory of value bunk? I will be leaving it to our guests to elaborate on what this means and what the stakes are, and they are Victor Magariño on the negative side and Ubersoy on the affirmative. Gentlemen, please introduce yourself. Victor, would you like to go first?
Yes, sure. So if I can be heard properly, my name is Victor Magariño, and I hold a degree in economics and one in philosophy from NYU. And I will be doing my master's degree next semester, so hopefully that will go okay. And well, I'm a Marxist because I understand that the methodology that Marx described for studying economics and for studying other political and other societal issues is accurate, that it best represents from all of the other theories that are out there, the phenomena that we see in the world, and that is basically the position that I will be defending here today with regards to the labor theory of value.
Thank you very much. And Ubersoy, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Yeah, sure. My name is Ubersoy. You may know me from some videos criticizing Marxism and generally based content, which includes but not limited to criticism of certain people and ideas. Just recently, I've produced an interesting video about Jordan Peterson, criticizing him from the right. I also do introductory videos to certain ideas, educational ones, meme videos, response videos, rarely an opinion and community pieces. and a lot of scientifically oriented videos as well. To best describe my political beliefs, I'm some sort of a leftist, economically speaking, though socially I consider myself to be part of the right. Epistemologically, I rely on both schools of reasoning, so to speak. You'd probably think of me as a centrist or as a person on the central left if it was not if I was not in favor of ideas encompassing building communities of strength based on shared identity and a different type of democratic governance that I'm yet to speak in my videos. Also, I'm doing a survey right now for a later project, and we need a larger Marxist and liberal samples. So if you could please fill out the survey, I would appreciate it, and you can find it on my Twitter or on my YouTube page. Finally, I will be producing a video about communist/Soviet nostalgia with very, I'll do it respectfully, either this month or earlier in July, and I think a lot of your audience would enjoy it. And with regards to my educational background, I'm a poli-sci student with a higher emphasis on politics. So that would be my introduction.
Thank you very much. And so before we begin, just some short words on format and rules. So how this is going to go down is both of you will get 5 minutes to make your opening statement with a 3-minute grace period following. What that means is that at 5 minutes, I will warn you to wrap up what you're saying, but at 8 minutes, I'm just going to cut you dead. So after that, there will then be 2 alternating 5-minute response segments for each of you, after which we will move into open discussion with audience questions in the latter half. I'm expecting that to go for about 30 to 45 minutes. After which you can give closing statements. Try to stay within 3 minutes, but I won't be too harsh on that. Rules. So no personal attacks against either you, your opponent, or the audience. Do not dispute the format with the moderator during the debate. Here I am God. Absolutely no slurs for anybody. YouTube doesn't recognize the use reference distinction, and neither shall I. The use of any slurs, at least ones that I don't have to Google to understand, will result in an instant ban. If that means cutting the debate short, so be it. For the audience, again, no making personal attacks against participants. Keep your criticisms of the arguments and not of the people. If we see repeat offenders, even without the use of slurs, if you are being uncivil, chat mods have the authority to remove people at will. There will be no touching of the hair or face, and that's it. So without further ado, I don't know who wants to go first. I was thinking Victor could, because Ubersoy earlier indicated that he was open about when he started.
It doesn't matter. I could go first. Actually.
You want to go first? What do you guys prefer? I can flip a coin.
You can flip. Yeah, sure. Flip the coin.
All right.
Yeah.
Ubersoy, your heads. Victor, your tails. Ready? I didn't actually flip a coin. I'm just saying tails. Victor, you're going first. Okay. So you have no, actually,
epic trolling moment.
Yeah. You have 5 minutes and a 3-minute grace period to make your opening statement. Take it away.
Okay, so that was a very nice way of getting this started. So I have a timer on my end as well, so that I can see it. So the labor theory of value. This is a really contentious topic. A lot of people have spoken about it. And I want to start describing what this theory is by describing what it is not. Basically, I want to start defining it by looking at the things that it is not. And one of the things that it is not is something that Ubersoy has said in the past that it is. And this already can tell us some things about the labor theory of value. Because what Ubersoy has claimed in the past is that the labor theory of value is a theory about some people stealing something from other people. And this misses out on the distinction between positive and between normative economics. And the labor theory of value does not lie in the category of normative economics. It does not try to say who deserves what should go where. It tries to describe something about the world, and this something is relative prices. So why is something in the market worth twice as much as something else? Okay. This basic question is a question that is phrased in the paradox of value, which is something that was talked about in the classical tradition and led the classical economists to adopt one form or another of a labor theory of value. Among them were, of course, Adam Smith, who said that, the reason why one diamond, even though it is far less necessary for survival than a glass of water, let's say, The reason why it's much more expensive, it's because it takes a lot more time to produce that diamond than it takes to produce a glass of water. So this is more or less the basic description, but of course there are a lot of details about how this theory works. And the basic gist of the theory is, okay, so relative prices are going to be determined by relative labor times, but not by relative labor times defined in any given sense. Okay, so we're talking about abstract, socially necessary, direct and indirect labor times. Okay, and the reason for this is because we are talking about societies that have market economies and that experience that are characterized by competition. And competition is a fundamental aspect of this theory, because it is basically what determines an emergent, let's say, a set of emergent properties. Through competition, these properties emerge, and these are the ones that we are interested in political economy. These are the ones that we are interested in study when we look at the economy from the perspective of the classical and of the Marxist school of economics. Okay, so one of these properties is the regulation and the determination of relative prices by relative labor times. And this is basically what the labor theory of value is trying to describe. Okay, is how, so value in this sense is going to be the determinant of relative prices, is going to be the determinant of the quantitative worth of commodities in exchange. Now, commodities are heterogeneous, but they are homogeneous insofar as we consider them as the product of human labor. And this is one of the reasons why we consider that it is appropriate to, let's say, start and to describe value formation from the labor times. Okay. Now, of course, we do not abstract from market demand. We do not abstract from, let's say, some inconsistencies here and there between demand and supply. We do not abstract from all of the turbulences that occur in market economics and that are actually important insofar as the outcomes that we observe empirically are concerned. But what we do say is, even when there are shocks to demand, even when some people have different preferences and these preferences change through time, even considering all of this, in the long run, what determines market prices, relative market prices, of course, is relative labor times. Okay, is the structure, the cost structure in a given economy. Okay, now comes the empirical predictions that we make, and the predictions are very clear. Some people say there are more, some people say there are less, but I think there are three main empirical, let's say, predictions that have received a lot of corroboration from the data that has been gathered from input-output tables. Okay. Now, these predictions are, on the one hand, a cross-sectional prediction that says that in any given input-output year, if you look whether through regression analysis, which is not my favorite way of looking at this, but vector distance measures rather, if you look at any given input-output year and you look at market prices and labor times, and so there are different prices, okay? There are prices of production, which are the ones that embody the labor time, and the turbulence that emanates from an equalization of profit rates.
3 minutes left.
Yes, so these are going to be very close, okay? So market prices are going to be very close to prices of production, which are mainly determined by labor times, and they are going to be very close to direct prices, which are prices that are directly proportional to labor times, okay? So prices of production are at a higher analytical stage than direct prices. And what we see in the data is that these sets of prices are really close. So if the labor theory of value predicts this, and this is something that we observe in the data, then we have reasons, empirical reasons, to believe that the labor theory of value is indeed correct. But there is also a time series hypothesis that says that changes in prices, in market prices, are going to be determined by changes in relative labor times, so in labor times. And this is also observed through the use of input-output tables, in this case, in a time series regression, okay? And in this case, there are not some problems in regression analysis that could appear in cross-sectional studies. And then we also have a structural hypothesis that says that in the short run, even with the turbulence of market economies, okay, even in the case that there is a large change in the distribution of total value added between wages and profits, which is theorized to potentially, it could have a big impact in this relationship between prices and labor times. Even in the face of big changes in this distribution between profits and wages, that the dominant element determining market prices is still going to be labor times. Okay. Now, a mathematician from NYU tested this in the past. His name is Jacob Schwartz, and he found that indeed this is the case. And then Claudio Puti, who was a student, a doctoral student at the New School, found with better data and with larger time spans a very similar thing. So this is yet another empirical, let's say, prediction that has been met with empirical success. So with that being said, this is the end of my opening statement.
Great timing. You had exactly 50 seconds left. Hang on, let me reset this. And Ubersoy, you have 8 minutes. Go.
Yes, thank you. I'll try to make it around the same time as Victor made it. I did prepare like a few paragraphs that I could either read out or because he had a lot of things that he said that I would like to respond. Maybe I'll do it after I read my paragraph. So it's as follows. I'm somewhat familiar with the content of my opponent, and I can already see that it relies heavily on academic and historic literature, and as we've seen in the introduction, but I don't believe it necessarily addresses the criticisms that were made against labor theory of value so far. I've seen a lot of your videos. You address only some of the criticisms. You never address hard criticism, and you further leveling the assumptions that I believe are flawed. And I think what I see very often, especially in academia or people who are like, for instance, mathematicians, is that those who are typically submerged into abstract and logical things, they almost turn it into some sort of a metaphysics. And they typically, I found them to be lacking of common sense that I believe have and will use in this debate in order to try to bring my opponent down to earth and force him to address the dubious assumptions and the actual nature of labor theory of value. Now, if this debate will rely heavily on economic literature, I will say it straight away that there aren't many Marxists and the proponents of labor theory of value in economics department. There are a lot of in humanities, in philosophy, but not in economics. The amount of Democrats in economics is only about 34%, at least according to 2007, survey of I think 60,000 people. I could cite it. I couldn't find anything quite regarding the actual Marxists. I think they're less than 3%, but I'm sure that they are marginalized and not relevant. Also, another 2014 study had determined that the ratio of liberal to conservative was 60 to 40 of about 2,000 surveyed economists. Moreover, I already see that he brought a few of interesting data, and I've seen your debate with this socialism done left guy, and he studied studies, you studied studies. I found his studies to be more convincing, but here's the thing. The Department of Economics is generally known for bringing back poor results. The replication rate is about 50%. Findings can be often inflated by a factor of 4. Only 18% of those findings have any empirical significance. And lastly, 90% of economics findings are underpowered. Moreover, and it's taken from a survey of 64,000 economists, 159 areas of research, and almost 7,000 empirical studies. Also, what's also interesting, the ideology plays into that as well, and even designed algorithms that are not humans can predict the political ideology of an economist with 75% accuracy. So that's just a computer. Just letting you know of the bias in the in this sort of field. Now I'm citing this for that reason, and I hope we don't dwell into this I would say unnecessary playing with numbers, where like essentially what you can do, you can reorganize the numbers as you'd like. That often happens, as in the debate with socialism done left. I've seen that you both tried to play with it, and generally I'll be coming with not an antithesis to your theory, but mostly I will be approaching it from an agnostic position, but I still think that other main two theories have more predictive and explanatory validity, such as the marginal theory and the subjective theory. So you did present your ideas. That was the end of my paragraph, and I guess I'll have like a few minutes, and I could respond to it real quickly. You said that it's not normative economics, as I argued in my previous video, that the surplus thing, and you're actually right on the surface. It's a positive economics, but the thing about it, I have
3 minutes
I
left.
am yet, yeah, 3 minutes more, yeah, okay. I have yet to see any Marxist arguing about it, or like any other person who bought into that with a like something positive. I know the classical economists like what's his name, Adam Smith and Ricardo, they weren't really normative about it. They were positive. That's true. But now you never see, like, you always get surplus value. You always get this revolution. You get socialism. It always jumps to that. Like you can't get away with it. Unfortunately, it seems. And I think I was afraid that I would misrepresent you somehow. But it seems like your main fundamental point is that relative prices are determined by the labor, but by the relative labor, not by the price. So it seems like I too totally understand you, and I guess like there are so many like I prepared possible angles from which it could be critiqued. Like for instance, it seems like this theory. You know what? I'll let him respond, and then we can see where we go next.
All right, so are you yielding the remainder of your time?
Yes, because I'm saving for the open discussion. That's where I'm hoping I'll do most of my damage.
Okay. Yeah, fair enough. All right, so we're going to move into 5-minute responses. Victor, you're going to go first. You're going to have 5 minutes. It's going to be sharp. There's no grace period here. It'll be Victor, Ubersoy, and then we will move into open discussion. So take it away, Victor.
Yes. So actually, there wasn't much really to respond to because he didn't really take any positions or said anything of substance. So he appeared to be saying at first that economics is a field that is dominated by people other than Marxists, and at the same time that is full of biases. So I think there's a little bit of a contradiction here, because if you're saying in the first hand that economics are not Marxists, so obviously your way of thinking is not popular, and at the same time you're saying economics is full of biases, full of all kinds of misleading studies and so on and so forth. I agree with you. I completely agree with you, and this is one of the things that I criticize a lot in my approach to economics, and this is one of the things that I want to, in a sense, shade some light into. And hear me out. I do believe that there's a lot of good work being done in different schools of economics other than the Marxist school or the classical school of economics. But when we are dealing with an issue, and I'm presenting you a theoretical framework, and I'm telling you this is the theoretical framework, this is how it works, this is the predictions that it makes, and these are the findings, and these are findings that have been highly corroborated in many different countries by many different researchers, including myself, who I've done this work for cross-sectional data on the Spanish input-output tables, and I found very similar results. And so when I'm telling you that this is something that has been researched so much and that it has found so much empirical support, which is something that, for example, many neoclassical theories have not found, or if they found if they have found any evidence that has contradicted the theory, they have said, oh, this is a paradox, and then they've moved on without discussing why their theory doesn't actually describe what is in the real world. But I can give you plenty of books that discuss the classical economic tradition and the theories in the classical tradition and in the Marxist tradition, and that give empirical arguments and that discuss the deficiencies in the neoclassical and in the post-Keynesian, for example, schools, and they tell you exactly why the data doesn't align with the theories, and that gives some sense, and that tell you a little bit why it is that there are these biases, okay? Now, these biases exist because economics is a science that is highly influenced by politics, and we know this because at the time of David Ricardo and Adam Smith, when they were defending the labor theory of value, they didn't have any, let's say, orthodox criticisms. They were the orthodoxy themselves. But as soon as Marx was the one that took their theories over and turned them into an economic project that suddenly started to have certain political implications, that then challenged certain, at a time of high political crisis and of warfare, if you can remember the 19th century, it was full of revolutions. You can see that at this time, right as Marx was publishing Das Kapital, that suddenly there was a shift to a version of capitalism, to a version of economics that looked at capitalism as something, let's say, idealistic, as something that everyone was better off, everyone was maximizing their utilities and their profits, and there was no conflict, no disturbances. Everything was smooth, equilibrium, all of that, you know? And this was the one that dominated. And then you have Keynes, who came and said, look, there are a lot of problems with this way of thinking, and he tried to propose his own general theory of economics, and he had some problems, but he was far closer to the classical school than a lot of people might think. And then there was, again, at a time of political turmoil, another shift in economics to the neoclassical economics as we understand them today. And this is slowly fading away, especially after the 2008 crisis, when it was shown, basically, that a lot of economists don't actually have very good solutions, nor do they have very good theories, which is the part that I'm highly interested in. So I would like to know, just to conclude, what are your really amazing criticisms to the labor theory of value? Because you have gestured at them, but you haven't given me any of those.
That's what
So
I'm going to do now.
That is the. So I would say that.
Hang on. No interrupting. Sorry, keep going. I'm going to give you 30 more seconds.
So I would say that that is the really important thing here. So stop, vaguely gesturing at the consensus or vaguely gesturing at how empirical studies haven't been found here and there to be corroborated or whatever, and try to get to the argument and why the data is wrong, okay? Because even if you think that the data might be misleading, you need to give reasons why. And when I debated Socialism on Left, he gave reasons why, and we discussed them. And in videos that I made afterwards, I've shown why I think that his reasoning is incorrect, okay? But you need to give me a reasoning so that we can discuss it. That would be it.
All right, thank you very much. So how this is going to go is, apparently you guys can unmute yourselves. So if you interrupt, then I'm going to give the person speaking another 30 minutes. So just a heads up. Not 30 minutes, another 30 seconds rather. That'd be a little bit ridiculous.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry.
So you have 5 minutes. Go.
Mm-hmm. So here's the thing. Like I've heard what you said. It just reminded me of what Richard Wolff liked to say. Oh yeah, we had slavery, then feudalism, now capitalism, all this stuff. But here's my actual criticism. I didn't lay it out in my previous statement because I was afraid that the timer would end or something. The main problem with it is that it has. I'm not even sure what you mean by like use value or price value, but the most important thing is that it fails to properly determine the price of anything. For example, I mean, it could be said that it applies to stuff that are related to work. For instance, like a carpenter, and maybe labor does go into that as well. But it's like a spectrum. In some cases of areas, labor does determine the price of something, but in others it does not. Where it doesn't determine anything, probably as we are both YouTubers, it doesn't matter how many hours you spend on creating a YouTube video. At the end of the day, the viewers decide it, and the marginal the marginal theory and the subjective one does prove that. But yours, I assume, and you should claim yours as universal actually, but your universal theory does not can't make any valid predictions. Your theory can't even make predictions about the price of a currency. it's not attached to any commodity. It's usually attached to fiat currency. It's attached to value we place on it. And what predicts it? Marginal theory, subjective theory. Your theory cannot prove that. Your theory also cannot prove what's the name of it? Certain minerals like oil. They don't really depend on any sort of a labor that was put into it at all. But also doesn't determine that. Certain things like wine, right? Like when wine gets older, the price inflates. Why? Because of subjective opinions, not because of the labor. And a lot of, like, if we're talking about in the future, there will be less and less value would be more determined on subjective things like that. It would be less determined on things like labor. And frankly, even in the ancient times, it wasn't really determined too much on labor. But in the future, it would be moving slowly away from it. And now we've got automation as well. And are you going to say that, for instance, how can you, I guess, measure the labor of robots that are going to produce any commodity that is quote unquote useful, right? How much time I have left? Is it like, what is it?
You have an hour and you have 1 minute and 45 seconds.
Okay. So yeah, sorry. I probably should bring a timer with me next time. So another thing, you know, what I wanted to get into that as well is what really determines value according to you, right? Like it will be very tough for you to base labor theory of value, you know, as something universal, because I can agree that in some cases it does really, you know, that the price is determined by labor, but in a lot of cases it really doesn't. It's like a spectrum. I've seen in your videos you claim it's like a value of usage, but the problem with it is that as we see so far, stuff like art, like jewelry, the use value of it is very low, right? But you know, those are the things that cost a lot of money, and why they cost a lot of money is because of things not related to the production of them. So that would be my critique.
Great, thank you very much. And Victor, you have 5 minutes to respond.
Yes. So I mean, almost everything that I've heard here is an argument from ignorance. It's many different arguments from ignorance put together and attempting to look like something that they are not, which is an actual cohesive refutation of the labor theory of value. Okay. So since you've given so many arguments from ignorance, I can only address to begin with the overall theme of all of your arguments, which is your ignorance. And this is important because you've said I don't even understand what you mean by price value. So if you don't even know what the categories of this theory are, okay, then why do you make a video about it and why do you debate me on it? If you don't even know what the basic categories are, if I've discussed this many different times in the past, what is use value, what is exchange value, what is price, what is value, and you don't even know them. So do I have 5 minutes here to explain to you what those things are, and then I don't have enough time to address your other arguments from ignorance? Is this the way that we want to debate this? Because, you know, I think that it should be better if the person that I'm arguing with knows what these categories are and is able to actually criticize them. Okay, so let me just explain to you what these categories are, and then maybe we can get to in the next round we can get to actual refutation. So use value is are objects, so use values in plural are objects that satisfy human needs and wants. Utility is the property that those use values have to satisfy human needs and wants. Okay, and use values are heterogeneous because they have different weights, different sizes, they have different colors, different materials, all of that. Okay, they're heterogeneous. And then they are also, we can also consider exchange value, which exchange value is the property that those commodities have of being commensurable with other commodities. Okay, so in the market they get exchanged, and then okay, when we look at exchange values, we look at the proportion. Okay, so how much do I have to give of something to get something else? And then relative prices tell us what these proportions are. Because if something is worth $2 and something is worth $1, then the ratio 2 to 1 is going to tell us how much I have to give of something to get something else. Okay, and this is why if we look at all of the industries in an economy and we take their prices and we take the relative prices and we take the labor time that goes into the production of those commodities of all of those industries and we see how close they are, okay, then we are testing this theory, okay, and then we are testing it also by looking at price of production and at direct prices, okay. So the important thing here is to note that use value is not the thing that we are really concerned with, because use values are heterogeneous. What we are concerned with is what determines the ways in which these heterogeneous objects get exchanged in the market, what makes them commensurable. And sure, they need to be useful in order to be commodities. Objects need to be useful in order to be exchanged, because nobody is going to want to pay something for something that doesn't serve any utility to them, of course. But what we're saying is that the utility that people get from consuming certain objects is not what determines their price. What determines their price in the long run, of course, when there's all of this, and this is another thing that you didn't understand, what is the theory of competition that is behind these postulates? And we are not abstracting from, as I was saying in my opening statement, from disturbances. We are not abstracting from commodities that are non-reproducible. Rare wine, okay, rare wine by its name, it's rare. Okay, so there are very few bottles of wine of some kind that is rare, and thus, because supply is limited and it cannot be extended, at least in the short run, or at least even in longer periods, then their price is going to be fully determined almost by whatever the person that is going to pay for it is willing to pay for it. Okay. So, of course, but these objects are, as Ricardo said in the very first page of his Principles of Political Economy, that these are scarce. Okay, so these objects are small in comparison to the large body of objects of social use that circulate in capitalist societies, that are produced and distributed in capitalist societies. So when we are talking about a theory of value, we're talking about a theory that explains all of this. Okay, what explains the generality of all of the commodities. So we cannot take a given isolated example and say, okay, then I'm going to build my theory of value based on this isolated example. We need to build it on certain generalities, and then we can get specific. But at least we need to get some ground, you know. That is it for my statement.
Thank you very much. And Ubersoy, 5 minutes.
Yes. Well, I mean, as predicted, I thought he would say something like that, I don't understand Marxism and etc. I did ask him like a general questions, since he thinks that his theory is universal, right? You would assume that it would apply to literally everything that is exchanged in the market, such as I mentioned, such as fiat currency, such as the price of stocks. Of course, there wasn't any answer, and there wouldn't, like, an answer to that is impossible, because there's no way he could say, without looking as a fool, that it is determined by labor, because we both know it's not. And here's my my central argument where it fails. And what doesn't fail here is the subjective and the marginal theory of value. They can explain it perfectly, but he also said that labor theory of value works like generally. You have to analyze everything. But it is my position that it works only in isolated examples where you measure, if you play with the numbers right, and sometimes you can measure that it correlates with the price of labor, labor of a human that is working for another person. Yeah, sure, you can get some correlation, but that's very isolated. It doesn't apply to everything. You might as well use the other theories and apply it here. And I'd also like to go back to his previous thing about the what's it called? The school of economics. How many different ideologies tend to dominate there? There are really he seems to think that there's like an overwhelming consensus, or well, not an overwhelming consensus, but that Marxist academics are very respected in economics, which is not the case at all. The best one you could cite is probably Richard Wolff, and he is totally marginalized outside of those Marxist discussions. Of course, there might be some bias, but nobody really accepts the labor theory of value except the neoclassical and the Marxist economics, and mostly it's just dominated by Keynesians and the Austrians and other types. I'm yet to hear those rebuttals. Like, I'm wondering how would he explain why there are a lot of things such as currency that are not determined by his own theory. I'm also wondering if he could falsify it, because a lot of Marxism is not falsified, and they like to claim that it's falsified. Well, I'd like to hear, since we're now having 30 minutes open dialogue or something, I'd like to hear if it can ever be falsified, if he's going to falsify a labor theory of value right now, right? So we could see whether it is, in what case it works and in what case it's not. And, my opinion is that it works only in isolated cases, quote unquote, works if you play with the numbers. I'm yet to hear how it is determining the price of or the value of a given commodity. So that's it.
Okay, you have 1 minute left. Are you yielding the rest of your time?
I'm yielding, yeah.
Great. All right, so we're going to move into open discussion. This is going to go on for about 20 to 25 minutes, depending on how it goes, after which we will take audience questions and open discussion will continue, but you will have prompts from the audience, of course. How I will prioritize those, of course, is super chats. If they exist, will go first. And then afterwards, I ask that people who have questions put asterisks at the beginning and the end of your questions. So when I'm scrolling through the chat, I can find them easily. But yeah, so you guys have roughly 25 minutes for open discussion. Go ahead.
Yes, so I wanted to start actually. So what I was talking about when I was referring to arguments from ignorance, you just gave a wonderful example of it. You took a category where the labor theory of value doesn't apply, and you said, "Oh, I cannot even fathom how the labor theory of value could explain this." The labor theory of value is not a theory of stocks; it is a theory of commodities. And sure, stocks are commodities in the sense that they get sold, but they are subject to different pressures than the ones that the labor theory of value describes. So there is actually a theory of stocks that is described by Anwar Shaikh, for example, who is one economist working in the classical and Marxist tradition, who appears in the last edition of the Eminent Economists. So on the edition of the book that recollects the biographies of all the eminent economists throughout history, and he appears there. So clearly, Richard Wolff is not the only one there, and it's clearly not the most eminent one, so to speak. And he describes, using the classical theories, how you can actually explain, for example, as you were saying, the price level. How can you explain, for example, interest rates? And the labor theory of value doesn't explain those things, because the labor theory of value is not a theory about those things. There are other theories in the classical and Marxist tradition that explain those things. So if you tell me, oh, how can you explain interest rates? Or, oh, how can you explain stock prices? And you know what? The subjective, so I've studied, of course, I've studied the modern models for how to explain stocks and so on and so forth. And you don't even know how much they have been empirically shown to not be accurate. Okay, expected value models and so on and so forth have been met with plenty of the contrary to empirical success. Okay, and there have been many economists trying to answer why these theories don't actually predict a lot of things that we actually observe. Okay, the same goes for interest rates, but these are things that are not the labor theory of value. So I don't even want to talk about these things now, because this is not the subject of this debate, and this is part of why I was saying that you don't understand this topic. So it's not a cliche of, oh, you don't understand. It's that you actually do not understand, and that this is a difficulty for us, because you are giving me examples that do not apply where the labor theory of value attempts to apply. Okay, so when I speak about, you talk about universality. Okay, the labor theory of value is not a universal theory. okay? Because it is a theory about how in capitalist society, so we are already abstracting from how prices might be determined in societies where capitalism is not the dominant mode of production. In a planned economy, for example, where prices are set by the state, the labor theory of value doesn't apply. It doesn't apply because the prices are not set through competition. They are set by a central planner, okay? And this is why this is not a universal theory. It is also not universal insofar as it doesn't try to explain how every single commodity is priced in the market. Because as I was talking about in my last segment, there are commodities that are not reproducible, and those commodities maybe to a lesser or to a lesser extent they can have influence from the cost structure of their industry, but these are marginal, okay, industries. But if we're talking about the vast majority of commodities, if we are talking about capitalist societies and we want to understand the general patterns, the labor theory of value applies perfectly well. And this is why I was saying that in the empirical studies, we look at input-output tables that cover the entire economy, all of the industries in an economy to different aggregation extents, and they have they show basically that all of the predictions that I described are empirically corroborated.
Okay. Can I respond quickly? And do you mind if we like talk sentences, like I talk a few sentences, then you respond, because I find that would be much easier, and
yes,
also for the audience. Okay, thank you. Yeah, I'll just respond for like 2 minutes. You did like stocks. Of course, it's a commodity, and you have applied it. I like that now. You went from, now it's basically not a universal thing. So I mean,
it never was.
Okay, good. But the thing about it, you said that it only works in capitalist societies, but unfortunately, it seems to been applied in other societies as well, like the Soviet Union. I don't see a reason for it not to be applied. Also, you haven't answered in other commodities such as money, like currency, that is not determined on gold. You haven't really,
because exchange rates are not the labor theory.
Well, okay, that's fine. What about
okay? Hang on, guys. One at a time.
Yeah. What about YouTube? Why can't you explain it through YouTube?
Sure. So okay. So the videos that are made in YouTube, first of all, there are a lot of videos that are not commodities because people don't pay for your videos. They
pay for ads.
They may give you some donations, but they don't pay for your videos. Okay, so your videos are not commodities.
I'm talking about value, how value is determined. And I think value is determined by
the abstract. So value is abstract, socially necessary, direct and indirect labor time, and it is supposed to be the determinant of relative prices. And when we look at the data, and we see that it is indeed the determinant of relative prices, then we conclude that the labor theory of value is empirically correct, regardless of whatever you were talking about, consensus. So, even though you yourself admitted that there are plenty of biases, plenty of misguided attempts at falsifying certain things in economics.
Yeah, I'm yet to hear
let Ubersoy respond. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm yet here to how you would apply it to YouTube. Because as far as I'm concerned, no matter how much work you pay into that, how the people would value, not necessarily just with money. I mean, yeah, sure, with money, but it's also likes, it's also views. It is determined by their own preference, and
so
similar is the mechanism.
Not a theory about likes in YouTube.
What?
The labor theory of value is not a theory about likes in YouTube.
No. I'm not saying that. Wait, hold on. It is determining because you put labor into YouTube, and it is classified as if you do your taxes, right, and you have made profit from it. Of course, it's classified. Similar with art. How would you explain art?
Listen. There's also labor into the food that I ate today that I cooked myself, and that is not a commodity. So it doesn't have a price, okay? So this is what I'm talking about. You cannot explain the price of something that doesn't have a price.
Well,
you know what I mean? If I eat, if I produce a dish and I eat it myself, The labor theory of value doesn't apply there because it's not a commodity. It is an object of social use, but it is not a commodity. And the labor theory of value is a theory about commodity exchange values.
Yes, and my argument is that
It doesn't
YouTube
apply
and
whatever.
art, it should apply there because other theories apply there as well. Yeah, why
No,
not?
that's the problem, that it shouldn't apply.
Marginal theory of value can explain with 100% certainty why a certain painting costs like $6 million and you spend like 50 minutes on it, and the other costs like $5,000 and you spend 10 hours on it.
Let's focus.
They could easily depend.
Let's focus here. Okay, so this is not something. So this is something that was already known by the classical economists. But people, okay, for a painting that is very rare, a Picasso painting, for example, or a Dalí painting, they were willing to pay much more than for an average painting of an average painter like myself. Okay. Now, this is something that they already understood, and they didn't talk about marginal utility for that because you don't need it. You don't need it. You can easily say, okay, this is a scarce good, and there are a lot of people who want this thing a lot, and they have a lot of money. So it's important how much money they have. So they are willing to pay more, and they actually pay more for it. But as Ricardo, and I'm giving you a Ricardo sentence again, these are marginal. These are marginal to the entire economy. Marginal. So if we're talking about reproducible pieces of art, then their prices get a lot lower. If we're talking about, for example, let's say that I start to produce a certain painting, okay? And they're not copyright or anything of the sort, and I start to produce it. Okay, if I only produce one of those and there's a lot of demand for it, then its price is going to be high. But if I start to produce a lot of them and other people can come in and produce them and produce those, then the cost is going to start to influence it because through competition, as I was talking about, prices get regulated by labor times. And
You're
this is what
undervaluing subjective.
And this is important, okay? Because this is what we see in the data. So you need to contend with the actual data.
Okay. I mean, are you saying that it's irrelevant now to labor theory of value, that art is irrelevant?
No.
Okay,
I'm saying that there are certain pieces of art that are marginal and that do not have a strong influence in the economy enough to actually determine the aggregate patterns that we observe. Okay.
No.
They don't determine unemployment. They don't determine distribution. They don't determine.
Internet. It's like, I think it's 12 to 15% of the economy, and especially art. Just recently, a few years ago, like Jesus painting, I think by Leonardo da Vinci, was sold for like a couple of $1 billion, right? So I don't see how it's like irrelevant. Yeah. Well, look. The thing that you say that because of course your theory, it cannot explain it, and you say that it's irrelevant.
It's not that it cannot explain it, is that it doesn't try to explain that, and it can explain why its price is high without needing to talk about marginal utility. And I just talked to you about how the labor theory of value says that these things are going to be more expensive because because those things are non-reproducible.
I got it.
Let Ubersoy do his response.
Yeah, you forgot about the subjective value also people place in certain artists, or like let's say social prestige or something. I'm not sure if you're like a cultural Marxist, but there is a very good work by what's his name? I forgot. Like a French intellectual of the 1990s. He was talking about the cultural capital, so you should know that. Also, I have another point that I mentioned. I asked you to falsify.
Before you start with that point, can we settle that your main critique so far has been that the labor theory of value doesn't apply to marginal things, that the labor theory of value already says that it is not trying to explain,
no.
and that it actually can explain not through labor time, but by talking about non-reproducibility. Can we establish that?
No. Look, my contention is that I mean, that's fine if you want to say that it shouldn't explain commodities such as natural resources, stocks, and money. That's fine.
Natural resources are explained. So have you ever looked?
Really?
Let me explain. Have you ever looked at any of the studies done on the labor theory of value? Have you looked at the input-output data that they use? Have you looked
If you
at the
can get the numbers
industries?
right, yeah.
Have you looked at the industries? Okay, so you should do that. You should look at the input-output tables that are used. I can give you, if you want, the ones that I worked with. They are available. They're public in the Spanish Institute of
I've seen
Statistics.
socialists done left
Okay.
debunking your studies and
But
citing
this is the
those
problem, that he didn't debunk these studies. This is the problem. He had following Nitzan and Bichler, and following also Andrew Kleeman. He had, who, by the way, Andrew Kleeman is also a Marxist, so you should also keep that in mind. Who had certain critiques of of regression analysis for cross-sectional data. But this is a very small part of what I'm talking about. Okay, and even there, regression analysis can be done for cross-sectional data. Obviously, you need to be more careful with it, but I'm not even talking about regression analysis right now. I'm talking about measures of vector distance. And when you measure distance between vectors, you're not measuring how changes in one correlate with changes in another one. You're looking at how far they are from each other.
Okay, look,
when you see that market
I was
prices
already prepared.
direct prices.
Yeah, that's fine. I've taken perhaps you may say I'm ignorant because I've taken a few courses on economics. My main issue here is that it just fails to be tested by common sense. And as there is one guy.
Don't get me with common sense.
Wait.
Okay, hang on, Victor. Let him do his.
Yeah,
okay.
I wanted to. I already said that you didn't respond, and there was a guy, Mr. Muller, writing in the chat. I was asking how would the labor theory of value would be falsified. It looks like we haven't got anywhere into the previous, I guess, reiterations of us speaking. So I'd like to know if it's really like a falsifiable, like a solid model. I want to see it falsified. And, if you're going to say that, it's falsified, it can't be falsified because we live under a capitalist system or something, that's just, it's not an answer. Really.
So listen, I have explained to you, okay, in detail in my opening statement already, what the labor theory of value predicts and how it can be falsified and who has falsified what. And you have ignored that, and now you're telling me that you don't even know how the labor theory of value has been falsified or could be falsified. And that I'm
asking you to falsify it. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm telling you,
go ahead.
There are three main hypotheses. Okay, so a theory produces hypotheses. So this is standard philosophy of science. Okay, so theories produce hypotheses, and those hypotheses are falsified against empirical data. And if they are corroborated, then of course, using more Lacatosian, more Popperian philosophy of science, we can say that they have stood against some empirical testing, but we don't need to say that they need to be necessarily correct, because maybe tomorrow we'll find data that shows the opposite. Okay. Yeah. Now, what are these hypotheses that are drawn from the labor theory of value? One, cross-sectional. Relative prices. Okay, so relative market prices are going to be equal or very close to relative price of production and relative direct prices. I tested this in Spain. We have Anwar Shaikh who tested this in the US, also Ochoa who tested this in the US. We also have Letteris and Sulfidis who tested this in Greece and in other places, and they found that they are indeed very close together in cross-sectional data in different countries in different years. Okay. What else? There is a time series hypothesis. Changes in prices are going to be explained by changes in labor times. Okay. Now, what do we find? We find indeed using time series regression, where the potential problems that socialism and left was talking about for cross-sectional data do not appear. And you can read Anwar Shaikh. You can read Anwar Shaikh, his last book, where he talks about why regression analysis is not even a problem in time series regressions. Okay. For this particular hypothesis, and we've seen very high correlation, very high R squares, okay, for time series regression, okay, between these different things. And we also have a structural hypothesis, which was tested by a mathematician from the Courant Institute of Mathematics in NYU, a very famous actually and a very prolific mathematician, and he showed, and then Claudio Putti, who is a doctor from the New School of Economics, found, using better data and larger time spans, that this structural hypothesis is also corroborated by data. So what is your counter argument to this?
Okay.
Because so far you said I don't even know how you can falsify
I
this,
mean,
but I
yeah,
show you.
well, it wasn't really a falsification. Well, I mean, part of the argument was falsification. You know, quote one of your hypotheses, yeah. But here's the thing, you know, as I mentioned, you can't really make anything correlate in economics. It's
No.
Very poorly. Here's the thing.
No.
It can in some places it can be correlated, yes, but in others, you know, like it really fails to measure other commodities, as we mentioned. It does.
No.
So I mean, like, once again, if is your falsification is that it only doesn't work in case if production relative labor times are not correlated to what's it called, the price of the product. So if they're not correlated, then your theory is bunkers. If that's your falsification, I mean, that's fine, but it really is not working in many cases. It does work in other cases, yes, we can agree to that, and also JF agreed to that as well. But there are a lot of spheres in economics where they don't correlate at all, especially now in the internet or the Uber industry, all this type of things. Like, prices are really determined by the I guess demand of supply, microeconomics 101. And you know, in some cases, yes, the labor goes into determining prices, but not in all cases. And certainly I would say that this theory is bunkers, because it doesn't apply to most cases, as marginal theory applies to all cases. That would be my counter.
So, I'm going to. I'm actually interested by this because you gave me the meme, the microeconomics 101 meme. Okay, so do you know who started to talk about demand and supply and all of that? The classical economists already spoke about demand and supply.
I know.
And you know what they said about demand and supply? You know what they said?
What? That it's determined by labor.
That their proportion does not explain relative prices in the long run.
Yes, look,
because
I don't deny that
short run distortions. Okay, and this is what all of the people that know about this say. Okay, is in the short run, shocks to supply and demand, sure, they can have impacts and they can bring up and down prices. In fact, okay, and I could give you an example, but this is going to take more time in case you would like to actually see an example of this. In fact, they are the mechanism by which, through competition and through demand and supply dynamics, these mechanisms are the ones that explain the reason why market prices are determined by labor times. So we do not abstract, as I said many times now, from demand and supply. So don't give me the meme, okay? Don't give me the microeconomics 101 meme, because I already know. Okay, I already know this.
I have another meme. I have Friedrich Engels meme correspondence.
Okay, slow down, guys, one at a time.
I have explained many times.
Okay, I have
Hang on, Ubersoy, let Victor finish for like 10 seconds, and then you go.
Sure.
And I have explained many times why that meme is wrong. It's just intellectual arrogance from the part of people who don't even understand economics. So don't give me that, okay?
Oh, yeah, I don't doubt you know more economics than I do. That's actually non-ironic. I'm not making a joke out of it. But here's an actual meme that I want to share. There's a correspondence between Werner Sombart, the guy who came up with late capitalism, and Friedrich Engels wrote to him that, yeah, basically labor theory of value is bunkers. If you want, I could cite it. But the thing about it is that even in his time, where not a lot of the stuff, like, we still had gold standard, there was no internet, and most of the labor was correlated with price at a probably higher rate than it is now. Yet still he understood that it's really bunkers, and I'm surprised actually to find that out.
So here this, okay? So I have described to you, okay, what are the methods for studying this, and I've said that for cross-sectional data, my favorite analysis is not regression analysis, but vector distance measures. Okay. Now you keep saying regression, you keep saying correlation, you keep talking about all of these things. Okay. And sure, okay, that is part of what I'm saying. But what I'm telling you is this, okay? I'm not giving you some very abstract correlation there that has no basis. I'm giving you, okay, studies that give you for 64, 72, many industries in an economy. So all of the industries that cover an economy, okay. And I'm challenging you, as I challenged JF Garepi, to go through the studies, to go through the list of industries and tell me which industries they think are missing. And no one has done this yet, let alone JF Garepi, of course, but you haven't done this either. To tell me which industries are missing that are so important to the economy that they would need to be there. Otherwise, it's nonsense. Okay, and I'm challenging you to do this. Okay, go through the list of industries, and all of those industries. What we do is we through a model. Okay, that in the case of pressure production, we could be talking about a circulating or a fixed capital model. Okay, in my study, I used a circulating capital model because there are different there are certain complexities to building capital matrices, so fixed capital matrices that are, a little bit more complex. Okay, but what we can do is compute pressure production from this data and look at how close they are to market prices. Okay,
I mean, I get it. Like, sorry to cut
and
you
they're
off,
very
but
close.
I know that. Like, you spoke of it like 3 times already, and I
And
did.
you keep saying things that do not
No,
show me that you
I
know.
did admit that it has some predictive value. In works that are really in certain areas of work, let's say, right? They have some predictive powers. The issue is that they fail in other areas of life. That's my main point. And what explains those other areas of life is the marginal theory and the subjective theory. The relative price of labor has little to do with it.
Okay,
And
so
that's unfortunate.
what we have established
Yes.
is that the things that you said the labor theory of value doesn't explain are things either that are not within the scope of the labor theory of value because they are addressed by other theories that are in the Marxist and in the classical tradition, okay, and that are actually not well understood within the framework of expected utility and so on and so forth. Okay, so keep this in mind because we've already established this, and that in the vast majority of cases, so if we look at the whole economy and all of the industries in the economy, that when we do the studies, they show not in one or two industries, in the full set of industries that characterize an economy, whether it's the Spanish economy like I did, or Greece, or Germany, or England, or the United States, or China, Korea, Japan. Okay, these are all the countries that we've looked at. And this data, okay, for the vast majority of the economy, is indeed pointing toward the conclusion that the predictions made by the labor theory of value, which are not abstract and falsifiable, applying only to one or few or two cases, no, they apply to the general economy, and they have been shown to be empirically corroborated. So this is what you need to contend with.
All right, so we're at the end.
Thing.
We're at the end of the open discussion period. Ubersoy, did you want to take 2 minutes to have a last
Yeah,
word?
sure. So predictive power of those is about 18%. I've spoken to a couple of people from the economics. It's really a bad field in terms of basically anything gets there as long as you correlate. I haven't seen the studies actually that you're referencing. If you want, I could reference my studies, but that's fine. I mean, like, I don't want to reiterate myself 6 times already, but maybe when the questions will come, I'll just repeat my position. But like, we're at the same page. Yes, like, I'm not disputing that it has a correlations or an effect on a lot of industries that are heavily laborally intense. I'm not disputing that. I am saying that there are a lot of industries which require labor that it just fails.
Which industries
Yes.
and show that they are not in the studies.
Well, look, I mean, I haven't looked at your documents, but I could name you quite a few industries. Most of them deal with stuff like filmmaking, art, internet stuff that are heavily dependent
They are
on
in the
people.
studies. They are in the studies, by the way.
Okay, well, I mean, look, if you can, please link me them. I haven't seen them. I've seen your debate with Socialism Done Left. Frankly, I found his studies to be convincing, but that's fine. Maybe you could, look.
Yeah, we're gonna move.
Okay,
we're gonna move into questions now. Thank you very much. All right, so we're starting off on a highbrow note. So this is from Papi Chulo. This is for both of you. Can Marxism explain the price of Belle Delphine's bathwater? Who wants to go first? Victor or
I don't
Ubersoy?
know. I don't know. My answer is I don't know.
You don't know. Okay, Ubersoy.
Yeah, of course it doesn't. But the subjective theory of value and marginal theory of value can very much explain that. Yeah.
I have a suspicion you could have answered that, Victor, but it was wise of you not to. All right, next question. And again, anybody who has a question, please mark it with an asterisk at the beginning and the end. I'm going to be scrolling through the chat. This is from Mr. Mueller. I apologize if I mispronounced your name. This is for Ubersoy. Ubersoy has stated the critique that Marxists aren't able to falsify their theory. Can he show how the subjective theory of value is falsifiable?
Yes. I mean, I'm not a proponent of it, but I'll try to falsify it. And it's rather hard because it depends on people's individual beliefs, right? But I think the best way to falsify it would be in isolation, without people's without like social opinion to be able to influence the buyer. So, for example, people should be isolated. There'll be. It's like let's do like a social experiment. There'll be two groups of people divided. One in a group, and they're shown like some sort of a product, and there'll be like a dominant opinion that this product is good or this product is bad, right? And in the other place, without social opinion, they would have varying opinions about the product. So I think this is the best way to falsify the subjective theory of value.
Thank you very much. Okay, so this is from Frank Harrison. If value is determined, and I take this to be directed at Victor, if value is determined by the labor that is embodied in the object, how do we sense this fact? I.e., if abstract labor is embodied in the object, a metaphysical claim, how do we perceive this?
So this is not a metaphysical. Claim. Okay. So we are saying that there is, in fact, an average amount of labor time that is required to produce a commodity, a given commodity. Okay, and this is the labor time. So we're talking not only about direct time, but also at indirect time. So the time that goes into the production of the raw materials and so on and so forth. And this is something that we can sense through input-output tables, by the way, because input-output tables give us information on the labor time. They give us information on the direct labor time that goes into the production of any given industry's commodity, and they give us this. So the labor time from industry one that goes into the production of the commodity of one commodity of him. So it's a little bit more complex than this, okay? But I'm giving it very abstract. But the amount of labor time that goes from industry one into the production of one unit of this industry, or the amount of labor time of industry two, okay? And we sum all of this together through a process of vertical integration, and then we find this abstract, socially necessary, direct and indirect labor time that is required for the production of any given commodity. Okay, and this is something that we can observe, and this is why we are able to falsify. However, we cannot falsify, which is something that Ubersoy was struggling with a little while ago, the subjective theories of value, because they are based, as he said, on subjective preferences that they are also in some instances, depending on what you're talking about, but they could be highly tautological, they could be highly unfalsifiable, and these theories in general don't have predictive power at all, other than to, in some instances, say, oh, well, if more people want this and they wanted more, maybe their price is going to be higher, and so on and so forth. But there are no empirical studies, okay? So solid empirical studies using all industries, using data from every industry in an economy and so on and so forth, that indeed show that the subjective theory of value is empirically corroborated. Why? Because this cannot really be done.
Thank you very much. This one's for Ubersoy from Slubber Gully. If
Mhm.
falsifiability is a criterion for the confirmation of a theory, then can Ubersoy explain how the problem of irrelevant conjunction and irrelevant disjunction can be solved by the falsifiabilist? Or the falsifiablist?
Yeah, I'm unfortunately ignorant on this question. I'm not very familiar with what those words mean, so I can't really answer that.
Okay, that's fair enough. This is from Monticulo. In the context of the costs of production from competition and labor time, is there any evidence of imperialism in global value chains and profit from expropriation? I take this to be directed at Victor.
Okay, so this is so I cannot really extend a lot on this particular subject, but I will be giving certain insights. Okay, so so the labor theory of value is a theory that is grounded on an understanding of competition that is not what a lot of Marxists actually have used, which is this notion of imperfect competition, which is the negative version of the idealistic perfect competition that we learn in neoclassical economics courses. Okay, now the reason why the classical economists did not believe in the power of monopolies, in the influence of imperialism in determining these sets of prices. Not to say, of course, that imperialism is not important, that it doesn't exist, that it doesn't determine a lot of things, but that what we are looking at is a theory of competition that is not grounded on a notion of imperfect competition. Okay, that it is grounded on a notion of real competition, of the competition that we actually observe. And for this, there's a lot of empirical work done on what are the actual patterns of competition observed. And what we observe basically is that through this competitive struggle, even in the face of some industries being more concentrated than others, some countries exerting more effort in international, and this is another specification, okay, international trade gives more caveats to the theory in its international sense, okay. And Ricardo has some theories about this. Marx talks a little bit about this as well, but he doesn't finish it because he died, and many of these things. But in general, okay, what we're talking about is a theory of real competition, where competition, okay, is actually existing, where it actually influences price determination, and it brings about the outcome of prices being determined primarily, even given all of the turbulences, by direct and indirect labor times.
Thank you very much. For Ubersoy, this is from Lily Voidtooth.
Mhm.
Ubersoy, are you a critic of capitalism? If so, why? If not, why not?
I have a very unpopular opinion. I think capitalism is a social construct, but I mean, yeah, like, don't get surprised. Do you know who actually came up with the term? I mean, sure, you know, it's Karl Marx. He coined the word capital. Well, the English translation of his work. You may as well say that, or somebody say that basically Adam Smith and things like that. But capitalism is largely socially constructed, and interestingly enough, it has been socially constructed from the left as some sort of a boogeyman. I'm not sure what capitalism means at this point. A lot of socialists, they don't even know whether Soviet Union was socialist, whether China is socialist. It's really is dependent on what you perceive as it. I'm not in the opinion that capitalism basically is a belief that private property should quote unquote be respected. I'm not sure it doesn't dumb down into that, and there are issues with what the hell is private property, right? I think we can both agree with Marxists. Well, I mean, not agree very much, but to a certain degree, that also private property is also constructed. And yeah, so answering your other question, I'm not really much a fan of a lot of what capitalism has done, especially mostly the wealth and income inequality, but also I think that some forces like employers can be exploitative of their workers, and I think that we should try to minimize that. So if that answers your question.
Thank you very much. This is from Frank Harrison. Is there an explanation for calculating necessary labor time? Sorry, this is phrased oddly. Is there an explanation for calculating necessary labor time that does not assume that there is a market demand for a good, i.e., what classic economists would say assumes subjective value? I'll leave that to both of you. Who wants to go first?
I can go first if you want.
Sure.
So socially necessary has two components to it, okay? So one is the amount of time that on average is required to produce a given commodity with the average conditions of production. And the other one, which is an addition that Marx makes when he's talking more about this phenomenon of effective demand and so on and so forth, which is the amount of labor time that is on average with the average technology required to produce a given commodity, that in the right amount so that it will become down by demand. So actually, this is something that was already known, that commodities, so this is like the what you call the mortal leap of commodities, is where when you know that a commodity is a commodity, or it's just another object that it's not useful, it's not a commodity, it's not something to be exchanged, is when you bring them to the market and whether or not people actually buy them. Okay. Now, what we say is that, of course, commodities need to be useful in order to be exchanged, in order to be commodities. But their usefulness is not what determines their price. Okay?
Ubersoy, did you want to comment on that? I can reiterate the question if you like.
Yeah, sure. Mm-hmm.
Sure. So is there an explanation for calculating necessary labor time that does not assume that there's a market demand for a good? You don't have to answer if you don't want to. It's just
I mean, I think that's more of a question for Victor. He's, but I'm not sure if you don't buy into his theory, you can actually answer that question.
All right, so fair enough. Moving down, Frank Harrison again asks. Oh, I think this is the same question again, but restated. Thank you for that. I noticed it too late. Oh, we aren't at the end, surely. Hang on. I might be prioritizing some on StreamYard, because I know there were other ones. Here we go. Victor, this is from Toplad. Do you have any recommended reading for Ubersoy to help him understand the LTV from a Marxist point of view? And to Ubersoy, do you have any recommended reading to help Victor understand the LTV from your point of view? Victor, you go first.
Yes. So I mean, there's plenty of literature. I would say that you could obviously start with the sections of Adam Smith and David Ricardo where they discuss this. Then you can go with Marx and Das Kapital. The first chapters are devoted to this analysis, and then you can study, for example, Pieros Rafa, his book Production of Commodities by Means of Commodities. You can actually look at Morishima, who has a book on Marxist economics that explains in the very beginning already a lot of concepts and explains them quite in detail. You can read Anwar Shaikh's last book in the chapter of the classical theory of relative prices, which I believe is chapter 9 of his book, Capitalism, Conflict, Competition, and Crisis. You can also read my own capstone thesis that I did on this subject, and you can read all of these studies that are done on it. I mean, there's plenty of literature.
Ubersoy, do you have any reading recommendations for Victor? I think he's trying to communicate in Morse code. Ubersoy,
oh my God! I'm sorry, I forgot to unmute my mic. Sorry. Yeah. So basically, what I read about it in school is, well, it's not precisely the. I'll get into LTV in a second, but what I read that easily, covers the claims of labor theory of values, my, I guess, textbook for microeconomics, and you can look at the section about what is determining price levels, but that's fine. I can give you another book that it doesn't specifically deals with labor theory of value. It deals with quite a few things. It's by Joanne Robinson. She's some sort of a Keynesian leftist who does criticize labor theory of value and criticizes it from a similar perspective as I do. And the book is called Economic Philosophy. So that's that. And it's not a very long book either, so you can read it.
Thank you very much. This is from Otto Aldari for Ubersoy. Ubersoy, how do you expect Marxian theories to be present in modern economics, which is in itself based on individualistic and liberal understandings of society, unlike Marxism?
Okay, well, I mean, it does. It's very present in humanities and social sciences, but, you know, we're still liberal. Yeah, it doesn't, like, it's very marginalized in economics, but it's not, I don't think it's because of the, I mean, sure, you can say that there's some sort of a liberal individualistic system that is, you know, controlling everything. But I think the issue is that there are other theories that explain it better. And I think, like, not even Austrian School of Economics, you know, we probably both disagree. Well, he for sure disagrees with I think some of what they said are relevant, but most important, like the main microeconomical, I guess, and whatever encompasses it is just, it just makes a lot of sense. And, you know, that's why they're not present. I think, like, they're tackling what is determining value way better by demand and supply.
Thank you. This is for Ubersoy again. From Lily Voidtooth. Ubersoy, what economic theory do you believe to be the most accurate? Do you argue for any other system beyond capitalism?
Yeah, so I guess I'll add on to it. I think that there are theories that are convincing in some sense. I can't say that I support one theory for sure. I think Keynesianism makes a good argument regarding how to organize demand, and demand sometimes is organized, right? Like not just in capitalist countries, but in socialist countries as well. I'm not sure if you consider socialism, the Soviet Union to be socialist or not, but you know, I think that explains a lot. And, you know, the role of government and the role of what's it called, wages and income inequality. I think it does. Austrian economics tackles with, well, what I found them to be, you know, interesting is that labor theory, or sort of, what the hell am I saying? They're like, they critique the governmental, I guess, interference, and some of their critiques I think are accurate, and also inflation. What else? Well, I mean, the main one I would say is microeconomic theory. As I said, I think it's the most accurate one. There are, I would probably say that there are elements in Marxism that are accurate as well. But, and finally, your other question, can you repeat it one more time? She said something about capitalism.
Yeah, sorry, hang on. Let me scroll back up here. So do you argue for any, sorry, it was just what economic theory do you believe to be the most accurate? And do you argue for any other system beyond capitalism?
Okay, yes. So as I said, probably the most predictive one is microeconomics, but I think that capitalism should be improved. I think we should return to the 1930s, 40s, 50s, and 60s way of solving questions, with some, I guess, Austrian critiques. And I think, like, this sort of a system would be more preferable. But I would also say that we need to ensure that there wouldn't be like a strong social inequality, and I also would like there to be an increase in social mobility too. So an economic system has to also tackle those issues. And what it would be, probably it would be like a synthesis. Frankly, I'm not sure it's coming up now. So yeah.
Great, thank you so much. I don't know if you cut out there. Are you still audible?
Yes, I just finished. Yeah.
Okay, no worries. It warbled a little bit. I just wanted to make sure you were still with us. All right. This is to Victor from Slubber Gully. Victor, what do you think about the economic thought of church fathers such as Saint Basil and Saint Chrysostom and its emphasis on charity/caritas? I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly.
Yes, so I mean, those are the way of thinking about economics that I was describing at the beginning are normative, okay? And what I'm focusing on right now, and what I focus in general, is on descriptive economics, on positive economics, because my interest is on describing the world to the highest degree of accuracy possible, so that I can then take certain perspectives, moral perspectives that I myself hold and that other people hold, and try to implement them with the knowledge of how the world actually knows. And what these people talked about was, all of these charity and all of these things. Those are things that I'm really not interested in, and things that I don't follow at all. Although, there are certain insights here and there that might have some more moral appeal. Okay, but that is not what I'm interested in at all.
Thank you very much. I don't know if I regard this as a serious question, but I'll ask it anyways. I'll answer it myself just so it's fair. So to Ubersoy, how far have you read into Capital? What of Marx have you read? Now for myself, I have read approximately 20 pages of Capital and a little bit of the German ideology, so not very much. Ubersoy.
Yes, I mean, as you can get, like, it will be funny if somebody would clip it, but I'm answering honestly with regards to Capital. I haven't read it. I've read some excerpts of it in other sites, especially chapter 1 and 2 that deals with labor theory of value. But I have actually read a lot of Marx. I have read a lot of Engels, and I've read a lot of Gramsci, Lenin, Stalin, Trotsky, even Mao, and what's the recent one? I've forgotten. And let me tell you what I think of it. Also, the reason why I haven't read Das Kapital is because I first wanted. I was a communist, by the way, in my previous life. I was communist for aesthetics, and then I decided to get serious about it. I haven't, I wanted to read Das Kapital, but because it was too long, I decided to first settle for simple things, like the Communist Manifesto, socialism, real or utopic, or sorry, I forgot what it's called, The Origins of the Family, or something like that. Some State and Revolution. I know what I'm talking. I'm not heavy on economics. Yes, that's true. But I first wanted to. Because I didn't agree with them really on the fundamental stuff, I didn't think that it was necessary to dwell into economics. And also, I'll tell you that they have a very valid critiques. Even there's small. Now, I have read the social alienation, or I forgot what it's called. It's near economics, I would say. I don't think I agree with it. I don't think he's right in social alienation. At least when I was working as a dishwasher, it didn't really matter to me what happens with it, and other people as well. I don't think he's much right in that, and that's why I didn't dwell into him more. So I did read a lot of Marx actually, and other socialist/Marxist writers.
Thank you very much. There was a fun one up here. Hang on. This is from Yoyu to Victor. You were invited to be unpleasant at the expense of Ancapistan. What do you think of that? What is your opinion of Ancapistan? I assume you just mean ANCAPs.
I mean, I accept the invitation. It will be fun.
No, sorry, that was my rephrasing. He asks, what do you think of Ancapistan?
I mean, no opinions there. No opinions.
Okay, fair enough. Ubersoy, did you want to weigh in on that or no?
Well, I think it's pretty cringe. But I don't know. Yeah, I'm not really a big fan either.
All right. I take this to be directed at Victor. This is from Yuval. How does the LTV handle skilled labor?
This is a good question because in general, there are different approaches to skill. Now, normally when we're doing empirical testing, okay, there's a way to account for skill, okay, and this is not a perfect way, of course, because no statistical tool is always perfect. But the way in which I did this, and the way in which I know that many researchers do this, is by taking the ratio, okay, of every industry, of an industry's wage to the minimum wage, okay, and multiplying that ratio by the labor coefficients, okay, and that way you get a sense of homogenized labor coefficient vector, and that is the one that you use for the models for the empirical testing, basically.
Thank you very much. And also for Victor from Noob Slayer. For Victor, can the LTV be used in anarchist Ukraine?
It would depend on what form of economic system worked there. Now, I'm not very familiar with how anarchist Ukraine, if it ever happened, in the sense of anarchist, how it worked. But I would say that it depends on how that particular economic system really is organized. Is it a market economy? Is competition present? And is there mobility between industries, between sectors of production? In that case, yes. If not, there are reasons to say that it might not actually apply there.
Thank you very much. This is from Wonderful Wonderful. Why does wine get valuable over time after the initial act of labor to ferment it? What does this say about the LTV? I will give that to both of you. Ubersoy, you haven't gone in a little while. If you want to go first, you can. Otherwise, I assume this is directed at Victor in particular.
Yeah. Can you repeat the question again?
Yeah, no worries. So this is from Wonderful Wonderful, who asks, why does wine get valuable over time after the initial act of labor to ferment it? What does this say about the labor theory of value?
Well, I mean, of course, my response is that it's bunkers. It depends on subjective demands of value of wine by the people, because as culturally we value wine that is that is old. That's what how our culture, let's say our superstructure, determines what we value. Also, I want to mention that there was a comment to me particularly about this French philosopher, and it went like this: oh, he wasn't an economic theorist. Well, yes, of course he wasn't. He was a sociological theorist. But if you actually read his book, it does help to determine what we value in a society. And frankly, his work very much aligns with what I'm saying right now. And I think that you should read it if you're a Marxist, or if you're wondering about what is value and power structures and etc.
Just for clarification, which book and author is this?
Oh my god, I forgot what it's Baudrillard or something. I'm sorry, I have a bad memory. I've read, it's in the 1990s. It came out in the 1990s. I read it I think 4 years ago. You would if you go to Wikipedia, you would definitely know what book it is. Are
you thinking of Simulacra and Simulation?
No, something else. All right.
Yeah. So Victor, just to reiterate the question, why does
I know what the question is. You don't need to.
Oh, sure, please.
So so I've explained this already. Okay, so wine, rare wine, and normally rare wine is wine that has been aged for a certain amount of time. A lot of people think that very old wine must necessarily taste very good or be very expensive. Not necessarily. Okay, there's really old wine that is useless. Okay, but in general, it's true that wines that are aged more. Okay. So in this case, as I was saying, rare wine is non-reproducible, or if it is reproducible, it is reproducible within a very limited extent and in the long run, in a very long run. Okay. Now, for those reasons, normally the labor theory of value doesn't apply to those particular cases. But rare wines are not what constitute the vast majority of commodities in an economy. That being the reason why it is a marginal thing that doesn't actually have a strong impact on the actual aggregate results that we do observe. Now, one thing, okay, that is normally criticized is that waiting time is for, in case of wine or other foods that need fermentation, that the waiting time is not accounted for. So that's not true, okay? So if on average it takes a certain amount of time to wait, waiting is not something that is, just sitting on your ass, not doing anything, okay? Waiting requires storage, requires space, requires work on certain things as well, and those things are also costly. So we also need to take that into consideration. Okay.
Thank you very much. We're going to take 5 more questions, then we're going to call it because we've been going for about an hour and 44 minutes. Sorry, actually, we're going to take about 3 more questions. I said we're going to take 5 a little earlier in private chat. Victor, this is from, and forgive me if I get this name incorrect, Novint in Hosek asks, Victor, what do you think of structures/models such as Italian corporatism or the labor market under the German labor front in Nazi Germany?
I generally do not believe that those are good models. If you want to leave it there, I can leave it there so that it's short. But I genuinely do not believe that those are models that we should either strive for or that represent the socialist values that I myself hold.
All right, thank you very much. And then Bob Ob asks for $10. Thank you very much. How do you deal with immiseration theory? Marx seems to be wrong about this. The expansion of supply of homes and capital in the middle class contradicts what Marx thought was necessary. I take this to be directed at Victor.
Yes. So this is something that has been spoken about, and I have certainly spoken about this in the past. Okay, so Marx had some insights into the potential for further immiseration of the working class, but of course he also had theoretical postulates that said, look, through class struggle, history progresses. Okay, so this is actually what ended up happening through the class struggle that he was working on as well, because he also was active politically and militarily as well, and Engels himself were too. They were able to attain certain, let's say, improvements in the living conditions of the working class that ended up solidifying a welfare state in certain countries, not in all other countries, and certainly not in China, for example, where to this day there are still a lot of workers that do not have the rights that and the salary nor the living conditions that that workers in Europe or in the United States have. Okay, so this is important, and Marx understood this very well. And there's question also on to what extent did Marx believe that the immiseration was going to continue until forever, because this is something that nobody in their sane head would actually believe. He believed that this immiseration was going to culminate in warfare, in struggle, and this is what ended up happening. Okay, and that's why in those places where this warfare ended up taking place and ended up bringing about certain improvements in the living conditions of workers, those societies today experience better working conditions. They didn't come from the sky, basically.
Thank you very much. And final question of the day. This is for both of you. This is from Yuval. Briefly, what are some alternate theories of value, if any, are viable to both? So, Ubersoy, you haven't gone in a little while. Do you want the last word, or do you want to go first?
I'll take the last word.
Sure. Victor?
Sure. So even in the classical tradition, there were certain different views from the orthodoxy of Smith, Ricardo, and especially Ricardo. And this, one of the main, let's say, people that opposed the labor theory of value of David Ricardo and Adam Smith was Malthus. And Malthus presented a theory of value, a labor theory of value, that worked on the grounds of commanded labor, not on embodied labor. So that's already one case. And Ricardo showed, Ricardo in his correspondence with Malthus, showed where the problems were and so on and so forth. And then Marx discussed this a little bit too. And then we also have the subjective theories of value, which there are different also, by the way, theories of subjective value. Okay, and then we have the one in the Austrian school, which is, let's say, the purest, and then we also have the neoclassical conception of value, which is not even an explicit theory of value. It's more a theory about a crossing between a demand and a supply curve that give rise to a price. And there are many problems with this model, by the way. And this price is then the one, right, that relative prices are determined in this way. And this is the one, for example, when you take advanced microeconomics and you start looking at general equilibrium models, okay, you start seeing utility functions that get maximized given some constraints, and then you start looking at Pareto optimal outcomes, and you also have a given initial endowment, and then you reach a certain point, and that is what determines the relative prices. Okay, now those theories are different. That particular theory is also different from the Austrian school, and you can read, for example, Hayek. Okay, when he says that, okay, these mathematical formalizations are very nice and they give rise to to certain nice ideas and to certain concepts, but he didn't believe that that was the right way to go, because he saw that through these theories there were certain views that emerged that were conflicting with his own. Okay, so there are different theories, and we can outline some of them.
Thank you very much. Ubersoy, did you want to weigh in on that?
Sure. Can you repeat the question?
Sure. What is an alternate theory of value, or what are some alternate theories of value? This is from you.
Well, yeah, because when they say what are the alternate theories of value, do they mean alternate theories of value to microeconomic theory of value? Because it's the commonly accepted one. Do they mean that, or what?
I think they're just asking generally.
Well, yeah, so I guess labor theory of value would be one of it. Subjective theory of value. And I'm not sure if I know of any other theories of value that deal. Well, of course, what that French sociologist was arguing, I think social capital and culture also plays a role in what you value. So I would say that, you should sometimes plug it as well.
Okay, thank you very much. So I think we're going to call that for questions. We've been going for quite a while. Did you guys want to do a final closing statement? I'll give you about 2 minutes each.
Yeah.
Okay. Victor, would you like to go first?
Yeah, sure. So I just put my timer on. So, well, I mean, we discussed today the labor theory of value, and I attempted to convince Ubersoy that this theory is actually an empirical theory that tries to explain something about the world that we live in, that it produces hypotheses that had been tested, and that those tests have shown that these hypotheses are corroborated by data. Okay, now he has misrepresented in many different ways the labor theory of value, and in the past he did so in even grosser ways. And he has attempted to basically move around all of these problems and not addressing questions, repeating certain things that were already finished. So his case is really nothing. I mean, I would like for him to actually present someday an argument, a refutation of the theory and of the empirical evidence in favor of it, but certainly haven't seen this. And I think that the empirical strength and the theoretical validity of the labor theory of value are still quite strong.
Thank you very much. And Ubersoy.
Yeah, well, I mean, I totally disagree that I have misrepresented him, because he said himself relative prices are determined by labor theory. So, I mean, the relative labor time, and I provided some examples where they clearly do not. I've seen some smug comments in the chat like, oh, Bell Delphine, why didn't Marx account for it? Well, I don't know. I think that's really ridiculous. It's not just Bell Delphine stuff. Like, there are a lot of commodities that labor has nothing to do with them, and I'm basically in the same opinion. But that's fine. Yeah, regarding studies, like unfortunately, I was not able to see any of them. And to be frank, so is my opponent. We just spoke of the studies. We didn't really, discuss them, like looked at them. We didn't have time for that, but I guess that's fine and fair. Finally, I think that what else? Yeah. So my final statement about the labor theory of value is that it cannot work. It should work universally. Like if it wants to be an accepted theory, like for example, the other theories that are in the academia, they work universally. And because this theory does not work universally, frankly, I think it is bunkers, and I think it has been falsified in some. He did falsify it, and I think I did show him that in some cases, it doesn't correlate. Labor, in some cases, labor time and relative prices do not correlate, and I did provide an examples. So that would be my closing statement.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us today. Thank you for those in the audience who asked questions and who sat through this hour and 54-minute long debate now. I'm hoping to do this more regularly. However, I am going to be vetting people fairly carefully for to take part in these debates. So if you know anyone who is of a certain quality and would like to take part in debates like this in the future, please DM me on Twitter. Otherwise, thanks again, everybody who took part today, and have a good evening and take care.